if you're real, then I need you to get me out of this mess, because I'm gonna kill myself, God. I really, really am. Hey guys, what's up? My name is Abby and I would like to welcome you guys to my first video. I'm going to be recording my story of how God found me, my testimony. I've been meaning to do this video for a very long time. I just didn't find the time, or things kept getting in the way, or maybe I just didn't like the footage. But yeah, you know, today's the day. We're in quarantine and I'm making it. So I'm going to start from the beginning. Well, first of all, I'm 20 years old. I got baptized when I was 15 years old, and so I've been living for God for about 5 years now. I go to an apostolic Christian church here in Escondido, and yeah, so let's get started. Growing up, when I was a little girl, I didn't really, my family wasn't really into church. I grew up Catholic. I got baptized as a baby in the Catholic religion, and I just remember that we would go to this one church once in a while. We weren't even like frequent members. When I was around 5 or 6-ish years old, we lived in some apartments, and our upstairs neighbor, she was actually Christian, and she went to an apostolic church. It's actually the first of Escondido, for those of you who are familiar with the Apostolic Assembly. And so I just remember my first experience going to a Christian church. It was definitely, in one word, different. I remember entering the building and I saw all the girls and women with dresses and skirts, and I saw these girls with white veils on their heads, and it was all shiny and glittery, and it was pretty cool. And then I remember the music was really nice too. The music was very loud. It was loud. The drums were really good. It was just like a concert kind of, and it's different than the Catholic Church. I don't know how the Catholic Church is now, but back in my day when I was going, I don't remember it being so hyped up like the Christian church was. I remember that my parents liked that church because we kept coming back to it, and shortly after, a couple of years later, that's when my parents started separating. They started getting into fights, and so back then, so it was just my mom and my dad, me and my little brother. Me and my brother were 5 years apart, so I'm 20 right now, he's 15 at the moment. So back then I was like maybe 6 or 7 years old, and my brother was like 1 or 2 years old. And I just remember that my parents, when they would fight, my dad would leave the house for the night, and he would go sleep at his friend's house or just somewhere else that wasn't our home. And I didn't understand what was going on. I was still really young. But all that I know is that things escalated a lot. The one night that I remember that really fell everything apart in our family was when the cops got involved. My parents got in a really bad fight, and the cops came to my house. One of my parents did go to jail for a couple of days, and then they got released, and ever since that night nothing was the same. So I was about 8 years old when my parents actually thought about divorcing. During this time, when I was around 8 to 10 years old, I ended up living with my dad. My mom was out of the picture for a while, and it was a very unique experience because I saw my dad fulfill the role of a mother and a father, and it was just a little weird, you know, because I wanted my mom around. I think that because of the events that happened that night, I think that's the reason why my mom and I had a very rocky relationship. Because she was out of the picture for a while, I couldn't really bond with her, and throughout that time, when my parents filed for divorce, that's when the court got involved, obviously, and I was required to go talk to a therapist to see how I was dealing with the divorce that was going on. Taking therapy was really helpful for me because it really helped me process the things that were going on with my dad and my mom, and being put in the middle, having my dad say things about my mom, having my mom say things about my dad, having to choose sides. Who do you want to be with, your mom or your dad? You know, and being a kid, you know, I don't know, I didn't want to make that decision, you know, I really didn't. And it was just a very difficult situation because I loved both of my parents, and I didn't want to choose, you know, who should I be with, you know, and both of them were fighting, I was fighting, you know, and eventually in 6th grade, the court ruled that I would live with my dad. So my dad had 75% custody and my mom had 25% custody. And it was very, very different. It sucked, honestly, because one birthday I would be with my mom, the next birthday I'd be with my dad, one Christmas I'd be with my mom, the next Christmas I'd be with my dad, you know, New Year's and Valentine's and like all that stuff. Like, it was just very, it sucked because holidays I had to alternate with who I would be spending that time with. And throughout middle school, keep in mind, we stopped going to church when I was around 7th grade. So throughout the time that my parents were getting divorced, throughout the time that they were getting separated, my dad and I and my brother, we would still go to church, still at the First of ESCO. We were pretty regular people, but as soon as the new school year started for 7th grade for me, when I was in middle school, that's when we stopped going to church. I didn't get baptized or anything. I just went because my dad went. I wasn't really involved. I wasn't like with like dancing. I wasn't singing or anything like that. I was just going just to go. So 7th grade came, 8th grade came, and my dad starts dating, right? And so when I was in 8th grade, literally like 2 or 3 days before my promotion, my dad, my brother, and I move into an apartment so that we can live with now my stepmom and her kids. So back then when I was in 8th grade, and I had just met my dad's girlfriend for the first time, they were just dating, right? They were just dating, and she had 2 kids from her previous marriage. And it came to be that those 2 kids are the same age as me and my brother, which I think is actually pretty funny, you know, because her daughter is the same age and grade as I was. Her son is just 1 year younger than my brother. It's just like a coincidence, you know, like, wow. And we bonded really quickly, and I'm grateful for that. So when we moved in together, my stepmom was already pregnant with my half sister, my little sister, and it was something else. When your family moves in with another family and you guys become all one family, that's very, very hard, You know, it's really, really hard. And it was perhaps the most difficult thing that I had to learn, had to live with, as, you know, a 13, 14-year-old. Living with another family meant that there were problems that occurred. I was now in high school, and I still had a rocky relationship with my mom. I was starting to get into fights with my stepmom, because keep in mind, none of us are in church, okay? So obviously we have different personalities, we have different tempers, and I just remember I was a completely different person back then, keep in mind, and I would say stuff to my stepmom, I would say stuff to my stepsister, I would fight with my dad, I would fight with my mom, and then I would take out that anger on my little brother. You know, I was just fighting with the whole world, honestly. Little things, you know, like, oh, you didn't do this, or you did that, like, can you not do this next time, you know? And it's just really difficult, you know, living with another family. And I had a very bad temper. I had a lot of anger inside of me. I would fight a lot with my mom, and it was very bad because I would end up saying things that would hurt her, and then she would say things back to me that would hurt me, and then at the end of the night I would just cry because I felt guilty, you know, like I didn't mean to say those things to my mom, but I was so angry and I couldn't control myself that I just said them, you know. And it was the same thing with my whole family. And because, you know, I'm in high school now, so things are different. You start becoming aware of your body, you start becoming aware of everything around you. And I remember I would feel very bad about myself. I didn't love myself, I didn't like myself. I would self-harm a lot, physically, mentally, and emotionally. I have diaries where I would write, and I would literally say, I really hate my body, I really hate how I look. Like, I would look at myself in front of a mirror, and I would just look at everything that was wrong with me, and I would say, if I didn't have this, then maybe I'd be prettier. If I had this, maybe my parents would love me more, you know. I just really didn't like myself. I didn't like my body. I didn't like anything about me. And I would try to do things to change the way that I looked like. I remember I would eat sometimes, and then I'd go to the bathroom, and then I'd try to puke it out. I remember I would try to do workouts in my room because I would try to lose weight. My weight was an issue for the longest time. I just didn't like how I looked like with the clothes that I had in my closet. I just felt like my worth was so little, you know? And not only that, but with my dad, because our relationship became so rocky, I felt like I had to compete with everybody else just to get my dad's attention, and I would try to compete for that by getting good grades at school, or doing sports, you know, or doing this, doing that, just because if I didn't feel like my dad loved me, I didn't feel like my mom loved me, you know, I didn't feel like anyone loved me. And it got to the point where one night, sophomore year, I was crying in my bed, in my room, I mean. My brother and I shared a room, and I remember my brother was already asleep. It was like 11 at night, I think. And I didn't know how to pray, so I was just crying. And I remember I felt so sad, and I thought about killing myself. I thought, hey, maybe if I die, maybe my mom and my dad will finally say something good about me, you know? Maybe they'll finally miss me. Maybe they'll finally notice me. It sounds very bad saying it, but during that time, you know, I wasn't thinking straight. I really, really wasn't. And I was thinking about suicide a lot, you know, maybe getting pills, maybe jumping in front of a car, you know, like, it sounds like a joke, but during this time, it wasn't a joke. I was genuinely considering it. And so I'm there in my room, I'm on my knees, and I'm crying. And I remember, for some reason, just the thought of God comes into my mind. And I say, God, if you're real, then you need to prove it. I'm not happy. I'm sad, I'm angry, and I want to die. I want to kill myself, God. This isn't life. If you're real, then I need you to get me out of this mess, because I'm gonna kill myself, God. I really, really am. And I start crying and crying and crying. And then I go to sleep. And a couple of weeks or months later, my dad and I get invited to go to another church here in Escondido. And so we go, I believe it's March of 2015. And so we go, and the pastor does his preaching, and then it's time for the altar. And I can't remember how it happened. All that I remember is that I ended up at that altar, and I was there in front of the pastor. He was praying for people, and I remember I just close my eyes and I say, God, I'm here. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do, but I'm here. If you can please talk to me, speak to me, God. What do I do so that I can feel better? So that I can change, so that my life can change. And then I remember God spoke to my heart, and he said, forgive others and you will be forgiven. It wasn't like a whisper in my ear. It wasn't like I saw a vision, this is what God said. No, it was like, the best way that I can describe it is like a feeling that I had in my heart. And that message was super clear as crystal, and I took it to heart. And I just remember I cried, and then I left church and I went home that night. And when I went home, I decided, okay, I'm gonna forgive. So I started working on forgiving my dad, my mom, my stepmom, my stepsister. You know, I forgave everyone. And every time I went back to that church and I prayed and I spoke to God, God would tell me something else. And little by little, I ended up changing. I became more patient. I started holding my tongue. I stopped spitting out words that were harmful to people. I thought about it more. I stopped listening to certain kinds of music. I stopped watching certain kinds of shows. And it was a very, very fast transition, because a couple of months later, that same year, I got baptized. It was actually August 2nd of 2015, I remember. I got baptized in the name of Jesus Christ, and ever since then, nothing's been the same. I'm a more happier person. I'm more joyful. I'm more patient. I'm more loving. I try to be a better daughter, a better friend, better sister, and it's just my relationships improved so much. I get along with my mom super well. My stepmom and I are at peace. She actually started going to church like a year afterwards, and she got baptized too. So we get along well. I get along with my stepsister super good. You know, we hang out, we get coffee, and it's just, my life is more joyful. It really, really is. I don't think of myself the same way as I thought of myself back then. I see my self-worth, you know, and I tell myself, you know, all these things. My life has been so much better ever since, I want to say since I found God, but truth is I didn't find God. God found me. I felt like I was drowning in my problems. I felt like I was drowning in everything, but I really do feel like God pulled me out of the waters, and he showed me who he was. And if it wasn't for all of those things that I went through, I wouldn't have seen the goodness of God in my life. If I didn't feel like almost dying, I wouldn't have felt what it's like to live. God really did rescue me from the hell that I was living in. You know, and for that I am so grateful. And I just wanted to make this video to share my story. Obviously there's more that there's more to be said, a lot more to be said, but I just tried to make this as short as possible. But yeah, if you're ever doubting God, if you don't believe in God, if you've been thinking about giving God a shot, I would say do it. You know, this is your sign. God does change people, and he changed me. If you would have seen me 10 years ago, you know, you would have, I'm thinking about it now, 10 years ago I was a completely different person, and now here I am. I still go to that same church, by the way. I'm really involved, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I really, really wouldn't. It's so evident to me that God is real, and I wouldn't change it for the world. And it's hard, it's not easy, but it's worth it. So that is the end of my testimony. If you guys have any questions, you guys can leave it in the comments below, or you guys can DM me on my Instagram username. Yeah guys, I hope that God blesses you on this day, and yeah, thank you guys for watching.